Hey there, and welcome to the Solo Book Club, where I, Jimmy O, review your favorite books and conduct a book club all by myself. Let's get started with our next book. Alright, for today's Solo Book Club, we're going to review A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. So this is a book that was published back in the late 1800s, I think in newspapers, and then finally put together as a book in 1905. So the main character of this book, her name is Sarah Crewe, and this book starts off with Sarah and her daddy. His name is Captain Crewe. They've been living in India for the last couple of years, and it is time for Sarah to go to school. So they end up enrolling her into a boarding school. By the way, Sarah does not have a mother. She's dead, and her only family is her dad, Captain Crewe. These people are apparently really, really rich. So they head up to the school, and Miss Minchin, who is the headmistress of the boarding school, she fawns over them because they have money, and she's trying to give them a big show. Well, either way, Sarah gets enrolled into the school, and she is a little girl who has a very vivid imagination. And one thing about her is that even though she's really rich and really privileged, she's never snobby or selfish, and she's actually really, really nice, really kind and gentle. While she's at school, she ends up befriending Ermengarde, who is the kind of like the school dummy, and she's about Sarah's age as well. There's a pretty big variance in the ages of the students. Sarah goes in and she's about 7 years old. The oldest students they talk about are maybe like 13 or 14. There's a couple other ones like Lavinia, who is the school bully. And then we have Lottie, who is 4 years old, and she gives like tantrums and nobody can control her. But Sarah befriends her and they become really, really good friends, and she even tells her to call her mommy because apparently Lottie's mom is also dead. So Sarah tries to sit in for her and try to control her the best she can because apparently no one else can. We also have Becky, who is a scullery maid. Basically she's a really, really poor person who has to work at the school basically for nothing. She sleeps in the attic, and she talks about how there's rats up there, and at one point Sarah tells her, well, I'd rather have rats than cockroaches. So it's one of those things where she kind of sees the good in everything. Well, because of her reputation, Sarah ends up getting called a princess because she's really good and she's really sweet. The mean girls of the school, Lavinia and her crew, they kind of call her a princess, trying to shade her in a way because they see her as a person who is living above her means, and she has a room that's all to herself while the other girls have to share a room. So they call her a princess because they don't like her. Everyone else calls her a princess because they really do like her. Well, time goes on. About 3 or 4 years lapse in this time frame, and it is Sarah's birthday. I think it's her 11th birthday, and her daddy, Captain Crewe, says spare no expense for my baby, and they end up throwing her a really big party. And at this party, there's all kinds of gifts, and there's all kinds of food and decorations. And at the end of it, we end up finding out that Sarah's dad, Captain Crewe, has actually died. And the reason he died is because he had some kind of fever back in India. And on top of that, he was really worried because he had sunk all his money into diamond mines. And apparently that didn't turn out to be a very prudent investment because he ended up losing his entire fortune. And now he left his daughter Sarah an orphan and a pauper. She's poor. And apparently there's no one else in her life that can take her in. She has no other family, no one else that they know of. Kind of find that hard to believe, but at the end of the day, no one's there for her, and she ends up having to become a ward of Miss Minchin, the headmistress, who apparently never really liked her, and she likes her even less because this whole party that they're throwing for her ends up costing her a lot of money because she never got paid back from Sarah's dad. Either way, Sarah ends up having to work at the school. She teaches the children French because she's fluent, and also she has to run a whole bunch of errands and help in the kitchen, and stuff that it's crazy that they make this 11-year-old do all these things. But in spite of all that, she uses her imagination to cope with everyday life, just like she did before when she was rich. She had a pretty vivid imagination. Now she uses it as a means to get through the day-to-day. So she ends up, still kind of being the same. Even though people are mean to her and they mistreat her, she's still really nice to everybody, and she ends up really being friends with Ermengarde and Becky. Those are her best friends, as well as Lottie, the 4-year-old that used to call her mommy. Well, one day, Sarah is out on the streets of London, or I think they're in London, and she finds a coin in the street, and she's really hungry, and it kind of feels like she willed that coin into existence, and there it was for her. She asked the baker nearby and said, "Hey, I found this coin, is it yours?" Who does that, especially if you're starving? She was literally starving, because they don't feed her well. They work her ragged, and then if she misbehaves, they punish her by not feeding her. What the hell? Either way, she's really hungry. She finds this coin. She goes to the baker. It's not hers, and she tells her, "Okay, well, give me some hot, fresh buns." And the baker gives her the buns. Well, as she walks out, she sees a girl who is in even worse a situation than she is. She's on the street literally begging, and it's really cold, and her clothes are worn, and this girl, she doesn't ask for money because she kind of sees that Sarah probably doesn't have anything to give her. At the end of the day, Sarah asks her, "Hey, look, are you hungry? Do you need help?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm hungry." Well, the baker ends up giving her 6 buns, even though she can only afford 4. She gave her 6. Well, Sarah, what she does, the princess that she is, she gives the girl who's even in more need than she is, she gives her 5 of those buns, and she ends up just taking one for herself. What's kind of cool about this is that the baker, she realized what happened. She sees the poor beggar girl, and she's like, "Hey, did that girl who was starving, did she just give you a whole bunch of buns?" And she was like, "Yeah, she gave me 5. So it was, one of those things where the baker saw this good deed, and she ends up trying to pass on any more good deeds by telling the beggar girl, "Look, if you're ever hungry, just come and see me." Meanwhile, we're back at the school. Again, some time passes by, and something exciting is happening next door. There is going to be a new neighbor. So that can only mean good things to the story, right? So this new neighbor ends up being what they call an Indian man. He's not actually Indian. It's just a person who had been living in India, and he comes back to London to live. He brings his assistant or manservant. At some point, they call the Indian people slaves. I don't know if they were actually slaves. I don't think this particular guy was. His name is Ramdas. Either way, so the Indian gentleman, whose actual name is Mr. Carrisford, they move in next door. Well, as it turns out, Mr. Carrisford is the man who had Sarah's father invest in diamond mines and ran off with their money, or so they thought. So apparently Carrisford got Captain Crew's money, invested it, and they thought everything was lost, but at the end of the day, the diamond mines ended up being very fruitful, and They both made a ton of money, but they realized that Captain Crew died and he has a daughter, and that all this money belongs to her now. Well, since she didn't have any family, they really didn't know who to contact. Mr. Carrisford, just goes on trying to look for this child that belonged to Captain Crew. And that's kind of where it picks up when he arrives back in London. So, and little do they know that the little girl is right next door, and that's kind of an ironic thing. Either way, Sarah lives in the attic, and it's full of rats, and she ends up befriending a rat with crumbs. She tries to make the best of her situation. They ended up letting her keep one of her dolls, so the doll's there with her. The doll's name is Emily, if you must know. One cool thing about her room, though, is that it has a skylight, and she can look out into the world. She tries to make the best of it. She looks through the skylight. She sees the beautiful sky. She hears the pattering of birds. She hears the rain dropping on the skylight. So she kind of sees the beauty in everything, even though it's a pretty dire situation. Well, one day she's looking out of her skylight, and she actually climbs out of it. She sticks her little head up, and she kind of looks around, and she kind of does this frequently. Well, one day someone else sticks their head out. It's the next door neighbor. It's the manservant Ram Dass. And what's really cool about that first encounter is that this dude has a monkey on his shoulder, and the monkey escapes his reach and crawls into Sarah's attic. So what's kind of crazy is that there's a London monkey just running around, and it ends up going into her room, and the guy goes in there, and he catches it. He kind of looks around and sees that it's a pretty shabby living situation, nowhere for her to put a fire. The quilts are pretty run down. The bed is hard as a rock. He kind of sees all that. Well, Sarah goes on living. She ends up, going and running her errands. And in the meantime, Ram Dass tells his master, Mr. Carrisford, that there's a little girl next door. She's, really poor, but they kind of see that she is a really good person. They see her in the streets, that she carries herself a certain way, and there's something special about her. So they end up actually sneaking into her room, which is kind of weird, and they make her room really nice for her. They give her things, they give her food, things to make her more comfortable, not knowing that she's the kid they've been looking for a couple of years. Well, one day the monkey runs away again, and Sarah hears it, and she lets him into her attic, and she lets him stay the night. And she ends up going to Mr. Carrisford's house, the next door neighbor, to return the monkey. And when they start talking to her, they realize that she's the little girl that they've been looking for all these years. And they tell her, look, we know your father. You think that his friend ran away with all his money, but there is a lot of money here, and it's yours. So she ends up being rich again. And apparently it's as rich as a real princess. So because of these diamond mines. Either way, the story ends by her getting all this money. They let Becky, the scullery maid, be her lady in waiting, and she doesn't have to go back to that miserable school with that miserable headmistress. So it really does have a happy ending at the end. Okay, now we're moving on to the book club portion of this, where we answer questions. And by we, I mean me. This is the solo book club. So the very first question is, did you like the book? And the answer, in short, is yes. I did enjoy this book. I know it is a children's book to start off with, So, I'm kind of looking at it through the perspective of an adult. I don't think I would have ever have read this book as a child. I didn't really grow up in a household where we read all that much. It's changed over the years. As an adult, I am much more open to reading and to learning that way. But as a kid, I don't think I would have really liked this book. But now as an adult, I feel like I can truly appreciate it. It has a really good message for children, as far as using your imagination, as far as being humble. I mean, the main character, Sarah, she is extremely humble. She doesn't change throughout. She is consistent. She is consistently nice. She's consistently sweet. She consistently thinks about others more than she does herself. And I think that's a really good message, especially if you're going to, read this to a kid. So yeah, I really did enjoy this book. One of the things that I think is most memorable about it is the fact that towards the end, when she's poor, Sarah ends up giving money to this, not money, she gives bread to this girl in spite of the fact that, she is hungry herself. And that sparks kindness in the baker, who ends up, helping the beggar girl at the very end. And then we come to find out in the last chapter that the beggar girl ends up working for the baker, and she kind of bettered her situation just because Sarah was able to kind of show kindness to her and show kindness through that baker. So I really do like that message quite a bit. So yeah, I enjoyed this book, and I would recommend it. Okay, moving on to our next question, which is, if you could write a fan fiction about this book, what would it be? And to me, there's this one part that I just kind of think about quite a bit when I think about A Little Princess, and that is a part towards the beginning when Sarah has her beautiful doll, Emily, and she's sharing her with her friends, and she lets everyone play with her, and everyone's really impressed by this doll. And Sarah ends up admitting to them that in her imagination, Sarah can read, and she does things while she is away from the room. And that just made me think of Toy Story, and how it's funny how the concept that came out in the 90s was thought of in the late 1800s. So I thought a really cool fan fiction would be Emily's story. She does come to life. She does have a mind of her own, and just like Sarah says, she pretends to not be alive. That way humans don't make her work. So I thought that was really a really funny part in the book, where she said, the reason that they don't allow us to see them alive, these dolls, is because humans would end up making them work. And I think that would be a motivating factor for Emily the doll, to not show that she is alive. So I thought that was a pretty funny part of the book, and I think that would be my fan fiction for A Little Princess. Alright, the next question is, what did you like least about this book? Well, I really did enjoy this book. There was not much that I disagreed with it. I thought the author did a wonderful job in weaving the story and telling Sarah's side of her life, and how she was going through her struggles, and conveying her kindness and her steadfastness. I think really the only thing that I didn't really appreciate all that much was how coincidental it was that the Indian gentleman just kind of moved in next door. Obviously it's a book. It's supposed to be a very specific story. I could have, I think, had it portrayed in a different way. Like I said, it doesn't really change the outcome of the book all that much. I just thought it was a little too coincidental. But at the end of the day, that's really the only thing I didn't like about it. And it's a very small thing. It's not a massive thing. But that was really the only point. If I had to kind of point anything out, that's probably what it would be. And again, it wasn't anything major. It's just okay, well, all of a sudden somebody moves in the next door, and it just happens to be the guy that ran off with Sarah's father's fortune, and he's been looking for her for years to give it to her. A little too coincidental, but at the end of the day, it didn't really change much, and I still like the book. The next question is, what are my favorite quotes from this book? And I have annotated quite a few, so I'm going to go ahead and share those. I'll read them from my phone. The first one has to do when Sarah meets Becky, and Becky kind of tells her situation of being the scullery maid and how she has to live in the attic, and there might be rats up there. And one of the funniest lines I thought was when she says, Sarah tells Becky, "Well, I suppose you might make friends with the rat in time, but I don't believe I should like to make friends with the cockroach." I just found that really funny, and I highlighted that one because of that. The next one, well, there's actually a few that I didn't think were funny. They were just, I think, just really sweet and kind of in keeping with the theme of this book. One was when Sarah was trying to coax the little rat out. I don't know what his name is. I want to say it was Melchandise or Mecandise. I don't know, but it's a fancy name. And with regard to that, the passage that I highlighted is, "At last in his heart told him they were really nicer than they looked, and he hopped nearer and nearer, darted at the biggest crumb with a lightning peck, seized it, and carried away to the other side of his chimney." To me, that just goes to show that this little girl who, is going through these difficulties, and, she's just a kind being. She was just kind of made that way. She's even showing kindness to a rat, which, nobody really thinks about. It's not like a pet rat. It's a rat that lives in the house. It's vermin, and it's, she's still showing kindness to it. So that's why I highlighted that one. And then one other one. And this is in the chapter called An Indian Gentleman. So it's towards the end. So in there she says, when you will not, well, she didn't say this is just a passage from the book. When you will not fly into a passion, people know you are stronger than they are, because you are strong enough to hold in your rage, and they are not. And they say stupid things they wish they hadn't said afterwards. There's nothing so strong as rage, except what makes you hold it in. That's stronger. A good thing is not to answer your enemies. I scarcely ever do. And this is at a point when I think Sarah is at her lowest, our main character. She's really having a really difficult time, and she never shows negative emotions in the book, but she does every towards the end, just very little. But she's kind of thinking to herself, and she's talking to the doll at that point. She's telling the doll essentially, I'm going to be like you. I'm not going to show any emotion towards these people because that's what they want. She knows that the headmistress, Miss Minchin, is really evil towards her, and she knows that if she responds by throwing a tantrum or getting mad at her or getting really upset, that it's really not going to help the situation. And at one point she even kind of lets Miss Minchin off the book. Off the hook. She mentions that, she doesn't really know any better because she's really just been this way her whole life. And, that Sarah understands that she really can't change her. And by not engaging and by not stooping to her level, it makes her stronger. And that is so true, and I think it's such an important message, especially because this is a kid's book, and you kind of want kids to not be crappy people, and kind of be more like her. So that was the last of the quotes that I really liked. And there are a few others, but we'll just kind of leave it right there. The next question we have is, what is your favorite theme for this book? And to me, the best theme that I can think of from this book is the concept of being kind despite what your circumstances are. I think that is one of the best things that came from this book, because obviously we see Sarah, the main character, throughout this book. When she's rich, she shares with her friends. She thinks of others. She sees less fortunate people and she tries to help them. She sees, Lottie, who is a little girl in her class who's 4 years old, who's crying, throwing tantrums. The reason she's throwing her tantrums is because she didn't have a mom, and that's something that Sarah can understand. And even though, she doesn't have any responsibility towards this child, she takes it upon herself to try to calm the child and to let her know, look, I don't have a mom either, but if you want to, you can call me your mom. And she ends up semi-adopting this child at school. That's one of the things that I really, really enjoy, is that this theme of kindness throughout. And then when she's poor, obviously, I've already mentioned it, but the fact that this beggar ends up getting a piece of Sarah's meal, and that's one of the things that should be consistent, that the reason they call her a princess is because in spite of everything, she conducts herself with the utmost dignity, and she treats others with respect. She is generous, even though she doesn't have much, she's still going to give it. So to me, that is the best theme of the book, and my favorite theme for A Little Princess. All right, our next question is, have you ever read any other books from the same author, and how would you compare them? I have read A Secret Garden by the same author, and I mean, Secret Garden is probably one of my favorite books, and comparing it to A Little Princess is a little tough. The main reason is because the themes are a little bit different. There was elements of the theme that I love from A Secret Garden, which was kind of like the power of attraction, how if you want things, you can manifest them on your own. There was, a little bit of that in this book, A Little Princess. To me, I just think that's such an important lesson that, you should learn early on in life. And again, these are kids' books. Allegedly, I don't know if kids are reading them these days. But, even if you read them as an adult, it is great to appreciate the fact that you can manifest things through your willpower and through, believing that you can do it. That was the main theme, I think, of A Secret Garden. And A Little Princess, it's a little bit different. I feel like in this one, it just reminds you to be a better person, to be kind no matter what your circumstances are, to not let your emotions get the best of you. And in comparing the two, obviously I am biased because I really love The Secret Garden, but this was also an excellent book with an excellent theme, and I would definitely recommend both. I'm trying to explore this author now. I see that she's written some other things, and maybe I'll review those one day. All right, our next question is, how did you like the ending, and is there anything that you would change about it? I enjoyed the ending. Like I said, I kind of didn't like the fact that it was so coincidental that they found her and she was right next door. I wouldn't change that, but I think one thing that I would want to change or just have the information or have it edited into is like some kind of revenge element against Miss Minchin, because she was such a nasty character to Sarah. And you know, after Sarah goes from being rich to being poor to being rich again, I really wanted to hear about Miss Minchin getting her just desserts. I mean, this person was responsible for causing so much misery to this child. I mean, a child who is, you know, completely innocent of her circumstances. Instead of trying to take her in and keeping her as a star pupil, she automatically wants to make her basically a slave. You know, she works her to the bone. She punishes her by not giving her food. Like, who does that? So I kind of wanted some kind of element of revenge for Miss Minchin. I don't think it necessarily would have come from Sarah, because that's really not in her nature as far as this book goes, to seek out revenge. But I really wanted her to get it, you know, maybe from someone else, maybe from one of the other adult characters that are helping Sarah, maybe from Becky the scullery maid. You know, I wish she would have told her, you know, she's giving her notice, and, you know, she would have given her the rat that was upstairs or, you know, something like that. I really just wanted Miss Minchin to kind of get what she deserved. They kind of do talk about how her sister Amelia, and how you know, she kind of tells Miss Minchin that she's, you know, a terrible person, and that she was so weak-minded that she should have stood up to her when it came to the treatment of Sarah. But at the end of the day, that wasn't enough. I really wanted a little bit more. You know, I wanted her to go through something embarrassing, like, you know, some kind of slapstick comedy where she kind of falls and breaks a leg, or, you know, they tell her that the person taking care of her is going to get this big stipend, and she missed out on it because she was such a jerk to her. You know, I really wanted some element like that. I think that would have made me even happier. I like the ending the way it was, because it was a happy ending to me. I just thought it would have been a little more satisfying to hear something like that happen to Miss Minchin, the evil headmistress. Thank you so much for watching Solo Book Club with me, Jimmy O. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. As always, you're welcome to engage in the comment area. Let me know what you thought of the review. Let me know of any future books you want me to review on Solo Book Club with me, Jimmy O. And give me answers to the questions for the book club. I want to hear from you. As always, thank you to Ben Sound for the music. Mr. Sound, you're the best. And again, thank you for watching Solo Book Club with me, Jimmy O.